Disney has no idea what to do with the Muppets. It seems that since the collaboration in the early 90s that resulted in Muppet Vision 3D, the company has been clueless about what to do with the classic Jim Henson characters. After the original plan to purchase them fell through, and the subsequent plans to build yet more Muppets attractions were cancelled, anything that's followed has been completely directionless. And with the 2025 closure of Muppet Vision 3D, there is reason to be concerned about the future of the franchise in the parks. I want to take a look at the history of the Muppets at Disney World, go through all the weird and forgotten Muppets attractions and how they came to be, and ask, does Disney really even care anymore about the Muppets? By the late 1980s, the Muppets held a firm place among the icons of modern American entertainment. Having existed for more than 30 years at that point, the characters and their creator Jim Henson had become household names, and Jim Henson's company, Henson Associates, was now a creative powerhouse, expanding beyond the world of the Muppets into further puppet-based feature films and TV shows. But that powerhouse did come with several problems. Firstly, not everything the company was making was as successful as it might have hoped. Films like 1982's The Dark Crystal and 1986's Labyrinth received mixed reactions, and the 1989 TV show The Jim Henson Hour was cancelled after only 12 episodes due to a lack of popularity. And additionally, Jim Henson himself was growing increasingly weary with large aspects of his work. Henson wanted to be able to focus on the creative side of the company, not the management side that now took up so much of his time. And it was with this in mind that in 1989, Jim Henson entered into negotiations to sell the recently renamed Jim Henson Productions to entertainment superpower Disney, and he began meeting with then Disney CEO Michael Eisner to discuss the potential deal. The negotiations centered around the sale of the company for around $150 million, or just under $380 million adjusted for inflation. With this sale, Disney would take ownership of the Muppets, and Jim Henson would be retained on a 15-year contract to work on future Muppets projects on behalf of Disney. However, they wouldn't take ownership of Sesame Street, a show that operated as a collaboration between the Jim Henson Company and the non-profit Children's Workshop. Despite this hang-up, the deal was a win-win situation for both sides. Jim Henson loved Disney. He'd grown up during the golden age of Disney feature animation, and cited Walt Disney as one of his creative inspirations. He particularly loved Disneyland and Disney World, calling them two of his favourite places. He felt that the Muppets' legacy would be safe there, at an entertainment company who really understood what he was doing and respected what his characters stood for. And he would get to continue pursuing his creative projects without the stress of managing the business. And Disney would gain yet more marketable, family-friendly characters to add to their enormous portfolio. More movies could be made exclusively for Disney to distribute, more TV shows could go on Disney Channel, and of course, the Muppets would unlock some new opportunities for the Eisner era of Disney theme parks. A deal in principle was agreed, and in August, Eisner and Henson appeared on stage, accompanied by Mickey and Kermit, to make the announcement to the press. An announcement that took place at the brand new Disney MGM Studios park, which had just opened 3 months earlier. While speaking to the press, Eisner also revealed that the first Muppets project was actually already in development, a 3D film that would open at the same park the following summer. And it was with this announcement that the Muppets Disney era would begin. While the as of yet unnamed 3D film would be the centre of Disney World's Muppets projects, it wasn't the first appearance of the characters at the resort. Instead, the Muppets would first appear in a TV special made to promote their arrival, named The Muppets at Walt Disney World. The hour-long special first aired on NBC on May 6, 1990, as part of the magical world of Disney, featuring an introduction by Michael Eisner and Fozzie Bear. The plot of the special featured Kermit taking the entire Muppet gang to meet his extended family in a Florida swamp. Dismayed at their surroundings, the rest of the Muppets suddenly discover that the swamp is right next door to Disney World, and spend the day touring there instead, breaking through the entrance of MGM Studios. The rest of the special consisted of scenes of different Muppet characters visiting various locations from Disney World's 3 parks, all the while being pursued by a park security guard played by Charles Grodin, who also appeared in The Great Muppet Caper. These scenes included Scooter and Bean Bunny visiting the jumping fountains at Epcot, Kermit and Robin walking around the New York Street backlot, and Miss Piggy riding Star Tours. There were also musical numbers like a performance of the song Rockin' Around the World by the Electric Mayhem, shot at different locations across Walt Showcase, and Kermit singing The Rainbow Connection, alongside a young Raven Simone. But the most significant parts of the special were a segment where several of the characters volunteered to participate in the Indiana Jones Stunt Show Spectacular at MGM, and one where Miss Piggy accidentally gets on Big Thunder Mountain at Magic Kingdom. Definitely the best part. The majority of the special was shot on location at the Disney World parks, during regular operation, with many of the guests appearing in the background being actual park guests from the late 80s. Even the scene of Miss Piggy riding Big Thunder Mountain was shot for real, with puppeteer Dave Goelz hiding out of view of the camera in the ride vehicle as it went round. The Muppets at Walt Disney World was intended to mark the beginning of a new era for the characters, one that both sides of the deal were very excited about. And by the time it was released, not only was the 3D film in development, but Disney had also begun developing stage shows, a new ride, and very early planning was taking place for an entire land at MGM Studios to be based on the Muppets. Shortly after the acquisition had been announced, Kermit and Miss Piggy were also quickly added as characters to the existing stage show at MGM named Hollywood, appearing in a new segment at the end. Unfortunately, not even 2 weeks after the airing of the special, the outlook for the entire world of the Muppets would change dramatically. On May 16th, 1990, Jim Henson passed away suddenly and unexpectedly of toxic shock syndrome, related to a bacterial infection. He was 53. He left behind worlds of colourful characters and countless puppeteers, writers, actors, and other artists that had been inspired by him. The Muppets at Walt Disney World was the last project he lived to see the completion of. To me, Jim Henson's passing draws major parallels with that of Walt Disney. They weren't exactly the same. Walt Disney had died of lung cancer, most likely caused by years of heavy smoking, but both were figureheads of their respective fields of filmmaking. Both experienced short, sudden illness, and both left behind major projects, which were now the responsibility of their employees to finish. The first post-Jim Henson Muppets project would arrive at Walt Disney World very soon afterwards, on May 25th, the first of the new theme park attractions, a stage show named Here Come the Muppets. The entrance to the building held a cutout sign featuring Kermit, Gonzo, Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, and Animal, and assorted movie production equipment sat on the roof, to fit the show in with the production theming the park was still committing to in its early years. Before the main show began, guests could watch a brief pre-show of Rolf the dog playing piano. Inside the main theatre, Kermit would appear on stage, not as a puppet, but as a full-sized costumed character. This had already happened when the first press announcement was made about the Disney acquisition. But this was now the first time a Muppet costume had appeared in the parks inside of an actual attraction. Kermit would tell the audience he's almost ready to begin the show, but he can't seem to find the other Muppets. Suddenly, he would get a call on a giant video phone placed to the side of the stage. On the other end would be Mickey Mouse, sitting at an office desk, a similar story element that had been used at the end of the Muppets at Walt Disney World TV special, where Mickey is depicted as the big boss of the resort. Mickey would ask Kermit how the show was coming along, and Kermit would assure him that everything was fine, but then hang up and frantically call the other Muppets on the video phone to try and track them down. Eventually he'd get a hold of Fozzie Bear, who would show up on stage. Anytime a Muppet would appear on the video phone, they would be a puppet, a segment that had been pre-recorded by Jim Henson Productions. But when they would appear on stage, they'd be a live character. Suddenly, the other Muppets would arrive by crashing a monorail through the building, and Miss Piggy, Bean Bunny, Gonzo, and the Electric Mayhem would all emerge. The rest of the show would be a collection of musical performances by the characters, all covers of well-known songs, except for Being Green, the only Muppets original in the show, with the finale being a performance by the Electric Mayhem of the song Shout by the Isley Brothers. Here Come the Muppets was a fairly inoffensive stage show, very quickly and easily put together. There was nothing super interesting about it, aside from it being the first show to feature the horrifying human-sized Muppet characters, and it was obvious that the intention with the attraction was to tide guests over until the highly anticipated 3D show could be opened. And the following year, that show would finally be ready. On May 16th, 1991, exactly 1 year after the passing of Jim Henson, MGM Studios opened a new attraction named Muppet Vision 3D. Completing the project had been difficult. Alongside the Muppets at Walt Disney World, it was one of the last things Jim Henson had worked on. He'd been the show's director, and when he passed away, the production was delayed as both Disney and Jim Henson Productions were unsure how to proceed. Filming was mostly complete, but there was still a lot of development needed for the other parts of the attraction before it was ready to open. In order to prevent the cancellation of the project and finish Jim Henson's last film, Frank Oz stepped in to complete Muppet Vision. According to him, he was offered $50,000 by Disney to do this, but turned down any monetary compensation and asked that he instead receive some new socks. Muppet Vision 3D was the centerpiece of a new area that opened in the west of MGM Studios, to the side of the recently pedestrianized lower part of New York Street. The attraction was housed in a large red brick theater, designed to fit in with the New York theme, and a large balloon with a picture of Kermit the Frog floated above. Inside, guests would find that the theatre had become the home of the new Muppet Vision 3D project, a collaboration with Muppet Labs, run by Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and his assistant Beaker, and guests were attending the theatre to witness a demonstration of the new technology. The queue featured a number of visual gags, most famously a key hidden under a mat next to the security guards area, and the extended queue featured parody film posters for different Muppet-themed movies. Entering the pre-show area, guests would find themselves in the prop storage room at the theatre, and televisions above them would play pre-recorded footage of different characters preparing the theatre for the presentation, making use of the multiple TV screens to create multi-screen gags. In the main show, Kermit would appear on screen and give an overview of the facility and the presentation of the new 3D technology the Muppets were about to present. Meanwhile, inside the theatre, several audio animatronics of Muppet characters would interact with the goings-on on screen. In the orchestra pit, an orchestra of penguins would provide the soundtrack of the show. The Swedish chef would work the projector behind the audience, and in a box to the side of the stage, Statler and Waldorf would heckle the show. These animatronics didn't just lay dormant until it was their time to speak though, and particularly the penguin animatronics would react to everything that was going on during the show. Bunsen, Honeydew and Beaker would eventually appear on screen to showcase the technology that makes Muppet Vision work, but would lose control of their invention, accidentally releasing the relatively new Muppet character Waldo C. Graphic into the audience. The show would then hurriedly move on to Miss Piggy's big musical number, disrupted by Bean Bunny, who in his efforts to help, angers Miss Piggy who yells at him, causing him to run away. And the rest of the characters would then go looking for him. This segment would include a costumed character of Sweetums entering the theatre in real life as part of the search. When he's found, the show would then end with Sam Eagle's A Salute to All Nations, but mostly America, an elaborate finale featuring fireworks, cannons, and toy soldiers playing dramatic classical music, and also the Small World theme, a finale that would of course go wrong in spectacular fashion. The chaos would spill over to the in-theatre effects, with the penguins pulling out a cannon and the Swedish chef firing a blunderbuss towards the screen. The explosions would cause the theatre to take severe damage, with screen effects at the side of the room simulating torn wallpaper. On the main screen, a hole had been blown in the back of the theatre, and it would appear as if MGM park guests outside were crowding around it. Finally, Kermit would appear on the back of a fire truck, apologising for the mishap, and thanking guests for attending the presentation as they exited the theatre. I didn't want to spend half the video summarising the events of Muppet Vision 3D, so that brief overview really doesn't do the show justice. Muppet Vision 3D was a spectacular 25-minute 3D film full of classic quotable lines and clever, creative fourth wall moments, combining both the on-screen action and really impressive in-theatre animatronics and special effects. And it never once stooped to any cheap 3D tricks.
Did you say cheap 3D tricks?
The attraction worked perfectly at both satirizing Disney World and the theme park experience, and at just being a solid piece of Muppets entertainment. Unfortunately, despite the success of the attraction, Muppet Vision 3D would open at a time of immense difficulty for the future of the Muppets. The show wasn't originally supposed to be the only new Muppets attraction, but was actually supposed to open as part of an entirely new land for the park named the Muppet Studios, a land that would have also featured a restaurant named the Great Gonzo's Pandemonium Pizza Parlor, a joint venture in the celebrity restaurant business between Gonzo and Rizzo the Rat, who had hired the Swedish chef to cook pizza for visiting guests. On video monitors above the tables, guests would be able to see the chaos ensuing in the kitchen. An animatronic Swedish chef would be visible preparing the food, and special effects in the restaurant would simulate various mishaps, like Gonzo and Carmela the chicken scurrying around the air vents after getting sucked in. But the biggest addition to the new land would have been a brand new dark ride named the Muppet Movie Ride. This would have been a parody of the park's flagship attraction, the Great Movie Ride, just a few hundred meters from the real thing. Guests would embark on a backstage tour of the Muppet Studio, where they'd be shown films currently in production and learn about filmmaking techniques that were completely made up. Using similar animatronics to the ones in Muppet Vision, each of the scenes of the ride would depict a different movie currently in production, a parody of different famous movies. In the Indiana Jones scene, Kermit would play the starring role. In a Peter Pan scene, the characters would be suspended from visible ropes above the stage, flying over London. And in the Frankenstein scene, Dr. Honeydew would experiment on a terrified Beaker, each going disastrously wrong. However, after Jim Henson's death, the Henson family cancelled the original acquisition deal, keeping control of the Muppets. In fact, right before Muppet Vision was set to open, they also sued Disney, claiming that Disney's use of the characters was a copyright violation. A settlement was eventually reached less than 3 weeks before Muppet Vision was due to open, but the new settlement drastically altered the assumed status of the original agreement. Instead of gaining ownership of the Muppets, Disney would instead license the Muppets from Jim Henson Productions, initially just for 18 months, allowing them to open the attraction and run a new live show. But as a result, the rest of the Muppet Studios was completely cancelled. Several Muppets plans for Disneyland were also cancelled as a result of the deal falling through. Mainly a new parade and a year-long promotion for the resort named Muppet Land, which would have seen the characters taking over various Disneyland attractions, appearing in rides like It's a Small World and Pirates of the Caribbean. The theming of Muppet Vision still held remnants of the Muppet Studios idea. The fountain outside depicting Miss Piggy as the Statue of Liberty that would have served as the centerpiece of the land did end up being built, and the parody movie posters in the extended queue to my mind clearly allude to the productions from the Muppet Movie Ride. But aside from a gift shop selling Muppets merchandise, the surrounding area just became a more general extension of New York Street, an area that was eventually renamed to the Streets of America. The main building across from Muppet Vision that would have likely housed the pizza restaurant, or a separate restaurant named the Swedish Chef's Video Cooking School, was instead used to house a movie prop exhibit, and a smaller Italian restaurant named Mama Melrose's was put in the area too. The Here Come the Muppets stage show closed on September 2nd, 1991, to be replaced by The Voyage of the Little Mermaid, after a little over a year of operation. And 2 weeks later, on September 16th, a new show nearer to Muppet Vision opened, named Muppets on Location, a show that had begun development before Jim Henson's passing, but had the majority of its production done after, with Steve Whitmire providing the voice of Kermit. This was an outdoor show once again using the human-sized Muppet costumes, depicting the characters filming a new movie named Days of Swine and Roses, with Kermit playing the role of director. Another simple musical show just like Here Come the Muppets, featuring a handful of songs, but now also with a meet and greet added into it. Muppets on Location was the last show to retain the identity of the Muppet Studio plan. Trying to pin down the history of the next attraction is where things can get a bit confusing. If you read pretty much any source about Disney World attractions, they will all tell you that the next time the Muppets featured in the parks was when Kermit and Miss Piggy made a cameo appearance in the finale of a stage show at MGM named Hollywood's Pretty Woman. I knew that this was going to come up, so I need to correct the record on this one, because I don't think this is true. Hollywood's Pretty Woman ran for only about 2 months, so very little information is available from it. But the few videos that I've been able to find online don't feature Kermit and Miss Piggy. Instead, it has a cameo from Roger Rabbit. If you read the wiki entries or articles that mention this fact, they all provide this one low-res photo of the characters. But I'm pretty convinced that this is actually from the older Hollywood show. The one piece of footage of Hollywood post-Muppets edition that I could find shows the two characters in very similar costumes as this promo photo. Miss Piggy may be missing the scarf, and Kermit's suit looks slightly different, but I'm pretty sure this is just the lighting, as Mickey and Minnie also wear similar costumes. As for why so many of the online sources made this mistake, Hollywood's Pretty Woman was basically an updated version of this show. It had a lot of the same moments, so it's easy to see where it gets confusing. But as far as I'm aware, it didn't feature the Muppets. The remainder of the 90s saw a downturn in Muppetness at Disney World. While the franchise was still doing well for itself, and Jim Henson Productions was collaborating with Disney on movies like The Muppets Christmas Carol and Muppets Treasure Island, nothing of any significance came to the Florida theme parks. In 1999, the Muppets' popularity saw a decline, with the commercial failure of Muppets from Space, and the following year, the Henson family finally sold the franchise. Not to Disney, but to a German company named EMTV, for a staggering $680 million. During this time, Kermit, Miss Piggy, and Sweetums all appeared as characters in the Disney Stars and Motorcars parade, in their own airship-themed parade car, starting in 2001. And in 2002, a direct-to-DVD movie named Kermit's Swamp Years was filmed at the production studios still operating at MGM Studios. Although the movie was owned by Sony, not Disney, so this didn't result in anything theme park related. By 2003, EMTV had seen its stock price crash and ended up selling the Muppets back to the Henson family for less than $100 million. And in 2004, 15 years after the first negotiations began, the Henson family agreed to sell the Muppets to Disney for an undisclosed amount. The deal was very similar to the one originally planned in 1989. Disney would receive the Muppets, but not Sesame Street. Now though, they would also receive the fairly recent edition of Bear in the Big Blue House, the TV show which had already been on Playhouse Disney since 1997, and had been appearing at Playhouse Disney live on stage at MGM Studios via license since 2001. Despite Disney finally getting what they wanted, they didn't begin any work on new Muppets projects at Disney World in the mid-2000s, likely related to the fact that the man who wanted them so badly, Michael Eisner, was replaced as CEO in 2005 by Bob Iger. In 2007, the first new attraction under Disney ownership would begin testing, first at California Adventure, and then at Disney World in Epcot's Future World. The Muppet Mobile Lab was a roaming character experience featuring Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker riding on board a wheeled rocket ship. In reality, a modified Segway, because of course it wouldn't be 2007 without a Segway. The characters would interact with guests, and a handful of pre-programmed special effects would be activated from the vehicle, like smoke effects and water jets. The vehicle was actually operated in real time, remotely from a control room backstage in the park, where the operator could control the characters using several hidden cameras. As this was just a tech demo, The Mobile Lab was only present in Epcot for a few months, before being moved to Hong Kong Disneyland. In 2010, the Muppets would appear again at Disney World as the face of the Give a Day, Get a Disney Day promotion, a volunteering drive offering free park tickets in exchange for a day spent volunteering at a number of organisations. Miss Piggy and Kermit would appear on a parade float, a car very similar to the one used for the Stars in Motorcars parade, for the honorary volunteers cavalcade. From now on though, they would not appear as human-sized costume characters like they did in the 90s, but only as puppets. In 2011, Disney released a brand new Muppets movie, a reboot of the franchise. To promote this, several of the characters appeared on the televised 2011 Disney World Christmas Day parade, including Statler and Waldorf, who heckled the parade floats as they went by. The hope was that the new reboot may bring with it a new wave of Muppet attractions to the parks, perhaps the completion of the Muppet Studios project from 1990. So, what did Disney open? Nothing. It wasn't until 2014, with the release of the sequel, The Muppets Most Wanted, that the next attractions were brought to Disney World. But Disney didn't seem to want to commit to anything substantial, and so these were only very small, temporary experiences. The first of these was a new scavenger hunt that replaced the Agent P World Showcase adventure named The Great Constantine Caper. Guests would be recruited as agents for the Muppets Bureau of Investigation, and they'd be sent to several countries around World Showcase to find clues that would help them capture Constantine, the villain from the new movie. Once they'd completed their mission, they would receive watermelon seeds, for some reason, and could go to an area to see a locked crate supposedly containing Constantine, although nothing was really inside. The scavenger hunt ran very briefly while The Muppets Most Wanted was released, replaced again with the Phineas and Ferb version by midsummer. The second Muppets-related thing that year was a Constantine meet and greet, temporarily brought in for the Villains Unleashed event happening at the parks in August. Guests could meet the puppet Constantine sitting in his jail cell, and he'd speak with them. This was actually quite interesting as far as these temporary meet and greets go, because Constantine was actually performed by Matt Vogel, the puppeteer who performed him in the movie, and later took on the role of Kermit from 2017. 2 years later, in 2016, Disney World got some actual movement on bigger additions. Starting in October, Magic Kingdom received the new show Great Moments in American History, a musical show taking place outside the Hall of Presidents in Liberty Square, where characters like Kermit, Miss Piggy, Gonzo, Fozzie, and of course Sam Eagle would appear from windows alongside a human actor on the ground, retelling moments from American history, like the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the midnight ride of Paul Revere. There were a few different versions of this show that would play throughout the day to passing guests. And surprisingly, the same week that Great Moments in American History opened, the Muppets Mobile Lab returned to Epcot after being absent from the park for 9 years. This was all in advance of new renovations being done at the now named Hollywood Studios. The main part of the Streets of America had closed in April of 2016 to make way for the construction of the massive Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. And as a result, Disney decided to transform the area where Muppet Vision 3D was into the new Muppets Courtyard, a mini-land entirely themed around the Muppets, a sort of nod to the never-built Muppet Studios, adding a new restaurant named Pizza Rizzo, a quick-service pizza restaurant run by Rizzo the Rat, replacing the Toy Story-themed Pizza Planet. Pizza Rizzo was a clear progression of the Great Gonzo's Pandemonium Pizza Parlor idea, and together with Muppet Vision and the Stage 1 company store gift shop, completed Disney World's first ever Muppets land. Still, the land wasn't quite at the scale guests had hoped for, because it was still missing one thing: the Muppets movie ride. In August 2017, Disney closed Hollywood Studios' flagship attraction, the Great Movie Ride. In its waning years, some hopeful fans had discussed the potential for the ride to be given a Muppets overlay, bringing it into the nearby Muppet Courtyard area. Ultimately though, the Muppets movie ride never happened, and the announcement that the Great Movie Ride would be replaced by Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway crushed any hope of a Muppets retheme. And while the opening of Muppet Courtyard made it seem like things were at last on the up for the Muppets at Disney World, the positive outlook was short-lived. Only 2 years after its creation, Disney had stopped referring to Muppet Courtyard by its name on park maps, instead just looping it into an area named Grand Avenue. That year, the Muppet Mobile Lab made its last appearance in Epcot. In early 2020, the Liberty Inn at Epcot's American Adventure was rethemed to the Regal Eagle Smokehouse, hosted by Sam. But later that year, Great Moments in American History closed, never to return, after Disney World's closure as a result of the global pandemic. In the 2020 holiday season, the puppets from the American History show appeared at the windows greeting guests, but this was far reduced from what had been, and the puppets didn't even talk. Since 2020, the only things that really featured the Muppets in Florida were other temporary installations or brief parks-related media appearances. From 2021 to 2023, various Muppets appeared in videos produced for the Disney Parks YouTube channel and Muppets social media at different places around Disney World and Disneyland. Personal favourites include Gonzo and Walter riding Journey into Imagination, Kermit and Animal taking a tour of Animal Kingdom, and Floyd Pepper from the Electric Mayhem riding Spaceship Earth. Some of the others have a very corporate advertising feel to them, but the idea in general does feel like it carries a lot of the spirit of the old TV special. In 2023, Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker returned to Epcot as part of the Brew Wing Lab for the park's Food and Wine Festival. But all this meant was that they appeared in a video loop played in the room, showing them brewing up new food concoctions. This exhibit also returned in 2024, and both those years saw Kermit and Miss Piggy starring in Disney's Holidays in Hollywood theatre show at Hollywood Studios, a part of the ticketed Jollywood Nights event. And in 2024, the Muppets' rocky life at the resort would be dealt a serious blow. In August, Disney announced that Hollywood Studios would be receiving a new Monsters Inc. themed area, complete with an indoor roller coaster and a new restaurant. The concept art they released was very vague about the exact location of the new Monstropolis area, but it caused a lot of worry among fans. There were 2 potential locations it was likely to go. One was the very barren animation Courtyard, home to the Star Wars Launch Bay meet and greet, Disney Junior live on stage, and the Voyage of the Little Mermaid that had been closed since 2020. But the other was Muppet's Courtyard, and the fear was that Muppet Vision could soon close. Many people, including myself, engaged in a combination of extremely wishful thinking and flat-out denial, searching for anything that might be evidence that Muppet Vision would survive, until November 2024, when more concept art was revealed, showing pretty definitively that Muppet Vision would go. Pizza Rizzo and the gift shop would go too, and the entire area would be transformed. At the same time, Disney announced that the Muppets would stick around in the park in a new way, as Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith would be rethemed to instead feature the Electric Mayhem, an armchair Imagineering idea that had been thrown around by fans for years. But what would have otherwise been a very popular announcement didn't really matter amid the news that the final performance of Jim Henson, that had stood in the park for more than 30 years, the work that he had entrusted to Disney would now be demolished and lost forever. Disney has no idea what to do with the Muppets. As you've just seen, for decades now, they've only ever been used in fleeting promotions and temporary experiences, wheeled out as a reminder of their existence in the simplest ways possible. The company is sitting on a massively popular franchise that they seem to refuse to use in their parks for anything significant. To me and many others, the recent announcement of the closure of Muppet Vision has been especially frustrating, because of the apparent lack of respect for the importance of that attraction that Disney management seems to have. Obviously, it can't be expected that every old attraction you like just stays in Disney World forever. These are working theme parks that need to keep up with evolving trends, and a lot of these lost attractions were just old and outdated when they closed. But this is the last major work of Jim Henson, and in an era where we talk so much now about the importance of media preservation, there's a real concern that this will become yet another thing that's locked away and lost to the general public. Disney has claimed that they are exploring ways to preserve the film, but considering so much of the experience is contained in the in-theater effects, things that just cannot be preserved in the same way as a regular film can, I'm extremely skeptical about what this supposed preservation will be. Theme park preservation is an incredibly difficult problem to solve for just this reason. So much of the experience is wrapped up in physically being there. And additionally, Animation Courtyard is just begging to be replaced. A new Little Mermaid show is opening there in 2025. But I feel like so many of the attractions that this area houses could easily be moved elsewhere. The Muppet Courtyard is all in all just a much better designed area. It's baffling to me that Disney would rather keep this over this. In 1989, Jim Henson was about to sell the Muppets to Disney because he trusted the company's vision. He had been given offers for the Muppets before, but turned all of them down until Disney came along. And now Disney are shuffling away the remnants of that trust. Disney has no idea what to do with the Muppets, and perhaps that's the issue. Perhaps they don't know what comes next. I think there has been an earnest attempt over the last 30 years to try and give them something worthwhile at the parks. If they truly were completely cynical to it all, none of this stuff would have ever happened in the first place. But since the loss of Jim Henson and the cancellation of Muppet Studios, as I said at the beginning of this video, it's all felt a bit directionless. Nobody's been willing to take a big swing, just small, simple additions here and there. Some with really creative ideas, but nothing that's lived up to what came before it. I'm aware that I've talked at length on this channel about the importance of smaller theme park attractions, but that's in the context of them being used to balance out bigger ones, not to exist as the only ones. I'd like to believe optimistically that the new Rock and Roller Coaster overlay will be the next big swing for the Muppets. It will of course be an e-ticket attraction with a Muppet theme, the first since Muppet Vision, which is exactly what I'm saying the parks need. But it being a re-theme rather than a brand new ride does make me a bit concerned that it'll be the same sort of downgrade as the Avengers overlay of Paris's Rock and Roller Coaster. Let me know your hopes for the future of the Muppets at Disney World. This video was way longer than I expected it to be. I really hope I didn't miss anything in this deep dive. Bear in mind this is only a look at Muppet attractions at Disney World specifically and not other Disney parks. Also, I want to say thank you to everyone for 50,000 subscribers. That's one of those numbers that feels really special to hit, so thanks to everyone who's supported the channel so far. I hope you enjoyed this slightly longer history video. I'm hoping to do a few more of these in the year if this is well received. Other than that, if you haven't already, please consider hitting subscribe, because there's always more theme park content coming in the future, and as always, I'll see you next time.